There are over 10 million online searches each month for information regarding domestic violence in just the US and Canada. Anyone, regardless of gender, sexuality, race, or religion, can experience abuse. Domestic abuse isn't always physical violence. It can be emotional, verbal, even financial. It can feel isolating and hopeless. For victims, it often takes several attempts to escape an abusive partner. There are many reasons victims are often afraid to reach out for help, including embarrassment or denial, or fear of losing their children or pets. But if you're experiencing abuse, you're not alone. It's not your fault. Help is here for you. domesticshelters.org is the leading domestic violence online resource where abuse victims and survivors can find everything they need to take steps towards safety, all in one place. With domesticshelters.org's searchable database of domestic violence programs and shelters in the US and Canada, anyone can find a nearby trained advocate who cares, along with support and resources. Victims of abuse may not be ready to connect with an advocate yet, but with domesticshelters.org's comprehensive library of relevant and high-quality content, it's simple to find information that can help change lives for the better. Domestic violence professionals and advocates rely on domesticshelters.org for ways to better support their local communities through free online expert-led training, award and grant programs, donation tools, and other powerful resources. The profound impact of domestic violence hurts everyone. Victims lose hope, children suffer lifelong trauma, communities are permanently damaged. That's why millions of people come to domesticshelters.org to get the answers and help that they need, and why 8 out of 10 domesticshelters.org visitors share their newfound knowledge with others, exponentially increasing public awareness of abuse. Your support helps connect those millions of victims and survivors of domestic violence with the resources they need to identify, escape, and heal from abuse. If you aren't sure where to turn, we're here to help you feel safe again, wherever you are on your journey. Please visit us at domesticshelters.org.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to pause for just a few more seconds here while people get settled in. We've got about, just shy of 300 people joining us, but we are expecting at least double that. So thank you to everyone who's getting logged in right now and getting settled in. We are going to get started here shortly. All right. Let's just start right on the dot. I've got my watch going here and it is exactly 1 p.m. Eastern time. So a few housekeeping items as everyone gets logged in today, but hi everyone and welcome. My name is Ashley Rumschlag and I am the National Director of domesticshelters.org at the Alliance for Hope International. I'm so glad you're here today, and whether you are feeling curious or cautious or a little skeptical about AI, you are in the right place. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to learn a little bit more. Joining me today are my two wonderful colleagues, Hannah Craig and Rachel Myers. They are going to be working behind the scenes, making sure that your questions are answered in the chat and organizing any questions that they find in the Q&A box so we can make sure that we address those as best we can during this presentation. I just want to touch on briefly the Alliance for Hope. We are proud to be a part of the Alliance for Hope as a program alongside the Family Justice Center Alliance, the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, Camp Hope America, then the Voices Survivor Advocacy Network, and the Justice Project. All right, so really quickly, we are excited. Sean Dickinson is here today. We're going to have him join us shortly. He is a lead developer from our tech partner By the Pixel, a team that's not only behind the design of domesticshelters.org, but also the brains behind our AI chatbot, Hope Chat, as well as the soon-to-be launched Alliance for Hope new website. So let's do the housekeeping items really quickly. Reminder, we do have live closed captionings available. So please, if you would like to have those closed captionings enabled, click show captions, and a transcript will also be available within a week of the presentation. We are in a webinar, so your camera and microphone are turned off. We'll use the chat to communicate with one another. And then if you have a question, please, please, please put that in the Q&A section. That really helps us to not miss those questions because the chat can sometimes go very, very quickly. So we want to make sure that we capture all of your questions. And then our follow-up, our promise to you, we are going to send you an email with a certificate of attendance. We're going to send you that transcript. We are recording this today, so we'll have a recording that we send to you. And then if we mention any resources along the way, like links, things like that, we'll include that in a resources folder so that you can share this with your team or refer back to things later on. We are coming up within a little over a week now for our annual conference. So we are meeting in San Diego starting April 29th for our International Family Justice Center conference. If you are so spontaneous and want to come, you are still welcome to come. We encourage you to join us. We are going to be covering a lot of different tracks in the strangulation world with our Institute on Strangulation Prevention. We're going to be talking about family justice centers. We're going to be talking about Camp Hope, programs for kids. And we're also going to be talking about domesticshelters.org and online engagement. So I know Rachel is our wonderful link gatherer. So she's dropping links in the chat. So look for a link to learn more there. And then our Purple Ribbon Award celebration. So we just wrapped up judging, we announced the winners, and now it's time to celebrate, right? To get together and gather and really honor all of our winners this year, but also give away some money. So we have $30,000 in grants that we're going to be giving away during this year's virtual celebration. So we do get together virtually because we are all over the world and all over the United States. So please join us for that. There'll be a link in the chat to sign up for that event. But let's dive in. So today's goals, we are going to talk about what is AI and what is not, how AI is already supporting domestic violence survivors. We're going to talk about the ethical risks and how to manage them. And then we're going to talk about actionable steps to prepare your organization for this tech shift. So we know that AI can feel very overwhelming. So our aim today is to demystify it. And most importantly, to help you walk away feeling empowered and not intimidated. We do want to gauge your understanding of how you're interacting with AI already in your day-to-day life and also your work. So if you don't mind sharing in the chat, how do you interact with AI in your everyday life? So I'm not going to give you examples. I'll have a slide that has kind of a breakdown of some ideas after this, but I'd love to see in the chat ways that you know that you're currently using AI. So I see just Googling. Yes, anytime you use Google, there are AI involved in that. ChatGPT. I'm so confused about AI. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Grant writing. Yes, I'm glad to hear that because that's a really great place to use it. Grammarly. Let's see. Food recipes. Cocoa Note. That's a new one. Just polishing statements. Yes, I do that a lot, right? You write it and then you say, can you just make this a little bit better? And it's amazing how ChatGPT can do that. Resume, Spanish lesson, wonderful. These are all examples of AI. Other things, your voice assistants use AI, Netflix recommendations, email spam filters, maps and navigation, facial detection recognition, text editors, autocorrect. Search recommendations, algorithms, chatbots, which we'll talk about, weather forecasting. So AI is really baked into everything we do in this world, and it's not always obvious what that is. So one last poll question before turn things over to Sean, but on a scale of 1 to 5, so Rachel, if you don't mind launching that poll, how likely are you to use AI to support survivors, right? So we've kind of talked about some people are already using it in like grant writing, things like that. But when it comes to actual survivor support, how likely are you to do that? So let's take a second, try to get to at least over half people participating. We are kind of in the middle. I like that. I like that. So 5 being the most likely and 1 being not at all. We are really neck and neck. So let's go ahead and I'll show you where we pulled up. Let's see if this will end poll, share results. So you guys should all see that right now. So we've got on the far end, 21%, 19%, not much difference. A little bit of pulling ahead in the middle with 3 at 33%. And then on the high end of, yes, I'm definitely going to use it, 11% for 4, 16% for 5. So this is very interesting. We're going to learn a lot today. And as you may have guessed, we're going to ask this question again at the end. So let's see if we can change some hearts and minds and really help to inform how AI is used. So really quickly, oh, we're going to save that for later. So Sean Dickinson is joining us now. He is the lead developer at By the Pixel. He has been with the company since 2021 and has worked on several projects for domesticshelters.org, including, of course, the website, our site redesign in 2022, and then the creation of Hope Chat. Sean was a teacher, so we're so excited that he has this educational background he can bring today. A teacher and technology coordinator at a small independent school in upstate New York. In his role at the school, he created custom software applications to meet the school's needs and taught various engineering and science electives. So he's joining us today from Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome, Sean. I'm so glad to have you here today. And we're just going to talk about the thing that you taught me about, because you're the person that's come on and helped us through Hope Chat and taught me all these fancy technical terms. And so now it's our turn to share this with everyone. So if you want to go ahead and turn your mic on, there we go. And go ahead, just tell us. So what is AI, Sean? In this in as simple terms as you can. We only have 90 minutes, so let's see what we can do here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. I'm really excited to be here to talk about this. Obviously, AI is blowing up the news these days. Everyone is talking about it. So you've asked me to kind of give a definition of it, which turns out it's not that easy to do because there isn't a clear-cut definition of what is AI. You listed all those different examples of ways that we use AI in day-to-day life. And so it's hard to pin it down to a single definition. I'm going to do my best, but really I'm going to kind of talk about a lot of different pieces that contribute to AI, and especially talk about how it is being used today, because even though this is actually quite an old term and an idea, recently there's been such an explosion in people talking about it, and they mean something different than they used to mean when describing this term. So the simplest possible definition I can give is that AI is some type of technology that allows machines to make independent decisions, so without human intervention. And they're supposed to mimic intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence. So these are algorithms, they're making decisions, but they're not true intelligence, right? There's a reason we put artificial in front of it. They're not forming thoughts on their own. So this idea of trying to make a program that could make a decision on its own has been around since as long as computers have been around. This term, AI, was coined in the 1950s. In the 1950s, the computers we were using were the size of a room, and you used punch cards to program them. So obviously, over the years, our understanding and realization of what this looks like has changed significantly. So advancements in technology obviously have improved what is possible to do with AI and what it really looks like. So if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about sort of the evolution here, how we've got to where we are today, and I'll dive in a little bit into what is the big deal that everyone's talking about now, and what are the opportunities that we have. So initially, AI started as a rule-based concept. I think of this as traditional programming. So in traditional programming, a programmer has to explicitly write cases of, if this happens, I want the program to do this other thing. And this was used to create very simple AI. There were chatbots that were created using this. There were autonomous vehicles that were created using this simple concept of you explicitly describe, if this case happens, do this other thing. But obviously, this is a very rigid way of thinking, and so it's very limiting in what you can do with this type of AI. So while it's possible to, use some randomness or kind of do some fuzzy matching to encapsulate lots of different things, if you are interacting with a chatbot that is using this rule-based AI, you know that it's a computer. It feels very stilted. It doesn't feel, as if you're talking to something that is intelligent. But it's a form of intelligence, and it's the basis for how we have moved forward in this progression. The next big step is this concept called machine learning. So machine learning is a technique where researchers gather really large sets of data, and they develop a special algorithm to process that data that attempts to find patterns. And it uses those patterns to then make decisions or predictions when it's given new data that it hasn't been trained on. The idea here is we want to create an algorithm that is able to statistically figure out, what is probable. So the way that they do this, there's a couple different ways. One is just using plain statistics, and another is a more complicated process that I'm going to say is beyond my pay grade to understand, this concept of neural networks. And this is where essentially computer scientists have modeled how our brains work using a computer program, and they use that model to teach a program how it should make decisions in a certain circumstance. So like I said, this is a very complicated process. However, the goal is relatively straightforward in that we're trying to take data, identify patterns, and if we identify those patterns, then we're able to make predictions on data we haven't seen before. So a good example of this is thinking about the suggestions you see when you're typing on your phone, or maybe if you're typing in an email or document, you sometimes get that suggestion of, well, what word are you about to type? And the way it's able to do that is it has analyzed hundreds of thousands of pieces of text. And so then it's able to learn what is the likely word that's going to follow in this context. Even though it hasn't seen the exact combination of words that you're putting together, it still can identify patterns and offer suggestions. This is the concept of machine learning. Now, these algorithms that come out of machine learning, we call them models, is the term that we use. A model is just an attempt to simulate some process. So writing a sentence or choosing the best photo from a series of photos. And you might be familiar, this term is something that we've borrowed from science. Scientific fields use this concept of modeling natural processes. So we mentioned, all these ideas of how we're using AI. A great example is weather patterns, right? Trying to forecast the weather. That's being done through a statistical model of saying, if we can take all this sensor data and figure out, well, what is the condition now? And we compare that to all this historical data that we have to show, well, the last time we had a condition kind of like this is what happened next, right? So we're putting in those inputs and getting out some sort of output. This is all under machine learning, and this really is the foundational technique in AI development. It's not new. This didn't just happen last year. This has been going on for a while. But in recent years, it has changed. And it has changed because the computing power that we have access to has continued to improve. And so we have more complex and nuanced models that we can train. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the growth that we're seeing recently. As you might imagine, mostly what people are seeing these days, what's causing a lot of buzz, is looking at how this works with language. So the next sort of generational leap or in techniques that have led to where we are today is this concept of natural language processing. So this is really just a specific form of machine learning where we're trying to teach computers to understand language. The reason it gets its own name and its own field of study is that language is really hard to understand. And that's because language is fluid, it's constantly changing, there's dialects, it's an ever-changing idea. And so it's hard to pin down, exactness in language. So special techniques were needed to start to unfurl and help computers to understand language, given how fluid it is. We've seen big breakthroughs in this over the years. You think about the virtual assistants that we use on our smart speakers or our phones, those were using natural language processing and still are today. I want to just again kind of point out though that this isn't cutting edge. This hasn't dramatically shifted in the past few years. Siri came out in 2011. The Google Assistant came out in 2016. So the concept of using computers to understand language back then, it wasn't making the same sort of headlines that it is today. So what's different? It's the last thing we have on this slide. This new thing that has come into our public consciousness, large language models. And most of the time today, when someone says, oh, is that AI? Or are you using AI for this? This is what they're referring to. They're referring specifically to the concept of a large language model. And they're really just a culmination of the previous steps that we've seen. These programs are created through machine learning. They're using natural language processing on a gigantic scale. The main goal of these programs, again, is to understand language and to generate language in a variety of languages and modalities. The only real difference, sort of game changer, if you will, is the sheer volume of data on which they've been trained and the power of the hardware that they're running on. There's a reason that they're named large language models. These models today are trained on trillions of words. To put that into some context, so on average, a human child by the age of 5 has encountered, heard, or read maybe 25 to 50 million words. That means that these models are being trained on 5 to 10 times more words than any one human could ever encounter over their entire lifetime. And that's just the models today. In fact, there are new models being developed that are being trained on even more data. To the point where some researchers are actually worried we might run out of words to give them, which is a wild thing to think about. But it's important to put this in perspective. No matter how impressive this is, and it's very impressive, these are programs. At their core, they are a set of statistical relationships. So when you ask the LLM a question, when you have it generate some words, when you talk to ChatGPT, it is not truly thinking about the answer. It is generating text word by word based on statistical patterns that it has identified based on its training data. A way to visualize this is to think about a game perhaps you've played where you create a story with a group of people, but you do it word by word. So, traditionally, maybe you have a piece of paper, someone writes down a word to start the story, and they pass the paper on. And the next person writes the next word, and so on and so forth. This is the game that the LLM is playing by itself. It is generating each word in succession. And so it's doing this by analyzing that context and choosing the most likely next word based on this set of statistical possibilities. And it's able to do this because part of that natural language processing is able to take text and turn that text into numbers that represent the meaning and relationships found within that text. And then once we have numbers, we can do something more traditional programming, right? We can make, mathematical models, statistical algorithms that use those numbers to figure out what should be the next set of numbers, which then we can turn back into words. It may seem like magic, or it seem like it's truly intelligent, but it is still a computer algorithm, and it still boils down to, if this happens, do this thing. So hopefully that has been a little helpful in unpacking what is AI. We're going to spend more time during this webinar, obviously looking at how we can use these tools. But before we do that, we just want to pause here and see if anyone has any questions that we want to address regarding sort of the big picture of what is AI.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Thank you that was a very thorough explanation, and it's great to hear that evolution, to see how we got to where we are. And it seems like if you drew a graph of like AI and technology, it would probably look like that, right? It's like we started here and now we're in that like take it off to the moon kind of phase. So yeah. We do have a few questions. Let me browse through here. So one person's saying, I have read that using AI is really taxing on the environment. Yes. So what are your thoughts on ethically using AI and its impact? Do you have any
That's a
thoughts?
great question. So it is true. I mentioned the computing resources that we're using to generate these models. Why they're getting so good is because we have better resources. But it is true they use an amazing amount of power. So that is definitely a concern. There are obviously things that we can do to mitigate that. So one would be just trying to generate power in greener ways in general, right? However, some other techniques that are being done in this field is looking at, instead of focusing on these very, very large models that can do everything, but require all this power generation, can we get more efficient? Can we get the same behavior, but doing it with less resources? And there've been some really great examples of showing this. Something a few months ago that, sort of threw the whole AI um, field for a loop was this DeepSeek, was this AI model that came out of China. And they talked about how they trained it on a fraction of the resources or computing power that some of the big models had been using. Microsoft is also doing some really interesting work here where they are using their big fancy model to train a much smaller model that then is able to sort of learn from the fancier one, but then that smaller model can run on much more sort of normal hardware. It could even run on your computer, your phone, instead of having to be, a server farm somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of like what you talked about in the evolution of computers, right? It used to be take up an entire room for a computer, and there's a natural evolution that technology gets more and more efficient. Yeah. Um, Someone had mentioned kind of how they were using Google or using AI through Google Translate was an example, but I think there's other applications for this was essentially, and we will talk about privacy a little bit down the road, but I thought this is an interesting thought is, using Google Translate, but in the space of domestic violence, obviously there's a lot of privacy issues where you don't want to put someone's name and address in there to have that translated because that data is in there. What are your thoughts on how these technologies use the data um for like privacy wise?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whenever you start, giving some system a bunch of data, this is a great question to be asking. What are they doing with this data? So it's important that as a user of AI, that you look at, if you can find what is the policy that's published, right, by this company that you're giving your data to. Do they talk about how they're going to use their data? Is there some privacy thing that, so often we glaze our eyes and we just say accept, right? You do want to read those and think about them, especially when you're thinking about sensitive data, personal data, things like that, to see, what do the companies publicly say they're doing with your data and what agreements are you giving to them? So always be cognizant of that, especially in this space.
Absolutely. And one other question that came through, I think this is maybe a whole different webinar in itself, but I want to tie it into AI, which is this idea of, how is AI technology tied to these, like the idea of deep fakes and people kind of taking over people's identities and their likeness and their voice. I mean, essentially just that is AI, right? That technology is fueled by AI.
Yes, it is. And you're right, that is a whole can of worms, certainly. Um, I think there's a lot that still needs to be done because this is such, like I said, it's not a new technology, but what we're now able to do, what now sort of anyone is able to do, right? So really the democratization of this technology, the availability of it has changed drastically in the past few years. And so there needs to be a lot more, you need to be a lot more cognizant of the content that you are consuming, and really thinking about it. And, you always should be making sure that you're looking at where this content is coming from and you're asking, is this content real? Is this content misrepresenting something? It's a very tricky thing to do. There's a lot of work being done, in the tech world to see, are there ways that we can detect this, that we can mark it and flag it and say, this is AI generated content. But that's a constant cycle, right? Where, trying to police it with technology, well, then the technology outpaces the policing technology, and you're constantly playing catch up. It's a very, very sticky situation for sure. So yeah, the best advice I can give is just be very cognizant when you're viewing content to be asking those questions. How do I know that this is, legitimate, and checking against, sources that you trust?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for the questions. We are going to check back in at the end with more questions, but one that popped in the chat that's actually a perfect segue into the next section, which is what are some other ways to use AI for DV besides Google Translate? So I'm going to dive in with essentially some AI use cases for support. So, and I wanted to acknowledge something that Sean said, the idea that there's things that are beyond his pay grade. So we don't need to understand everything about AI, right? There's this, we are kind of in this space of how we just need to understand what's possible, what's out there, what technologies are there, and how are some ways that we can start just thinking about using it as a solution for a problem. So we don't want everyone to feel like they have to understand it super in detail. There's even people like Sean who are making amazing progress, amazing products in AI that don't understand everything. So just really wanted to point that out. But so what does AI mean for all of our work in the domestic violence field? What ways can we harness this powerful tool to make AI work better for us and help us do our work better? So some of the kind of basic overview things that we can focus on are efficiencies, right? So faster responses and making hard tasks easier. So focusing in on how can we use AI for efficiency, cost reductions. There are a lot of ways that AI can essentially lower the cost of what we're doing. A lot of that ties into the efficiency, right? But there are things that AI can do that can do it a lot cheaper. Scalability, so making services more accessible by making them less resource intensive. And then finally, personalization. So no longer one size fits all, right? We can use AI to personalize based on the information provided, on the person using it or the situation or what have you. So AI can help to make a more personalized experience. And we're just going to touch on these 6 different use cases. I have some examples for some of them, but a lot of them are just, let's get our brains thinking about it. So thinking about risk assessment and predictive analytics. So AI is being trained to analyze patterns, specifically in police reports, to identify high-risk domestic violence cases earlier and more accurately. For example, some jurisdictions are using algorithms that scan for red flags like escalation of violence or presence of weapons or previous restraining orders to assign a risk score to an officer. And one example is, let's see, go here. So predicting domestic abuse and police risk assessment. So this is something out of the UK. AI models are helping police predict repeat abuse cases. So more accurately and more fairly because there's not the human bias involved in there. So they're focusing on incident patterns instead of demographics that led to better resource allocation and fewer missed red flags. So AI is already being used in different ways. And essentially, they were able to prove that it outperformed the existing police risk assessment tool and identified high-risk individuals. And reduce that bias. So that's a huge thing with policing, right? The bias in their work, being able to just take the blinders of basically the human lens off of it and just look at the data and break it down and focusing on things like incident-based variables like escalation, frequency of injury versus race or gender. Another example, if you read our weekly news articles we touched on recently, which is a hospital piloting AI tools that detect domestic abuse from intake notes. So catching subtle clues like vague injuries or frequent ER visits. And imagine using these similar tools in shelters, right, to triage survivors based on urgency. It alerts the healthcare staff to potential abuse cases, even if the person doesn't disclose it, which most of the time is probably going to be the case. They're not going to outwardly share that they're being abused, but using those subtle red flags, such as frequent visits, vague injuries, all those things to pick up on domestic violence that might be missed by our human clinicians. Another opportunity that I mentioned would be resource accessibility and language inclusion. So for many survivors, the ability to communicate in their preferred language or even access basic information in a language they understand can really make the difference between reaching out for help or staying silent. So AI-powered translation tools, we already touched on this idea of using Google Translate for this, but we can integrate them into tools that we use every day. So think bigger beyond Google, but think about your intake systems that you use and how could you work with your tech partner to integrate AI into that. So that way it's all very inclusive regardless of their native language. But these tools can, auto-translate intake forms, help survivors navigate websites, and reduce burden on bilingual staff, but also, people who only speak one language. So just another way that you can use these AI assistants. Another area is legal processes. So document review and legal aid. Legal processes, as we know, are all very overwhelming for survivors. They can be overwhelming for advocates as well, right? It's not an area that we're always well versed in, and can be very, very complex. So that's where AI for document review and legal aid can come in. AI can summarize legal documents. I know I've used this before to summarize long, 40-page documents of legalese just to kind of get a sense of what we're talking about here. Survivors can do that too. So using tools like ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other AI models that we're becoming more and more familiar with, using it to just summarize those documents. Also, AI generated summaries of survivor statements that advocates, law enforcement, medical professionals can use to understand a survivor's experience to better meet their needs. These summaries can reduce the re-traumatization by minimizing how many times survivors need to repeat their stories. Also, just assisting in restraining orders. So AI tools can guide survivors step by step through paperwork, autofill the known information, reduce clerical burdens on advocates. One example is a legal chatbot that asks simple questions and converts answers into court-ready documents, right? So instead of it feeling like this major overwhelming form, they're able to kind of just chat with them and feel a little bit more human and produce that document. Also want to highlight Amy Says. So Amy Says is a chatbot, but I'm going to kind of highlight its ability in this legal realm because they actually allow survivors to upload relevant documents. Amy then uses the documents to take on complex tasks like reviewing patterns of behavior, compiling critical evidence, and protecting you against false allegations. So like I said, Amy Says is a chatbot. It's got this special ability for you to upload documents and help you to, or help the survivor understand their situation, and they can kind of ask questions based on those documents. All right, so another area, marketing and outreach. So this, I'm talking about specific direct services, but we can't provide these direct services without our marketing teams and without getting the word out about what we do. So think about ideas like event marketing copy, grant proposals. I saw that come up in the very beginning. I'm so glad to see people thinking about that way. One tool that we've used is notebook.lm. So upload all your different documents about what maybe past grant proposals, things like that. And then you can just kind of ask questions based on that specific grant requirement. And that can help to kind of guide your answers in a way that's informed by what you have created in the past and real information about what you do. Meeting note taker apps, those are great. So if you have one of those, they can follow you into the Zoom room and they're kind of sitting there. And then at the end, they give you a great summary of all the notes from the meeting. Social media automation. This is a place that, you can get really, really complex. You can literally set it up where you just type in, write me 5 posts about for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and it will push those out. You can even put it to the point where it literally will post them for you. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Again, leaning into that efficiency side of things, right? We talk about how can how can AI help support domestic violence survivors, but by supporting your organization and making it more efficient, you can turn those resources elsewhere. Data analysis is a huge one, right? So you can only stare at a spreadsheet for so long and see so many things, but AI can see things that you cannot. So it can see trends, it can see patterns, all of these different things. So using AI as a tool for looking with a different lens on the data that you have. And then document summary. So kind of tying into the idea of the legal contract, but it's just a great way to get a quick read on something. The next thing, and just real quick, so tools like Canva's Magic Design, just Canva in general has AI tools baked into it. I mentioned ChatGPT, Claude AI, all the different tools, but those are just examples of how you can accomplish those different tasks that AI can do for you. Fundraising, so very important. There are some current experiments going on right now. I wasn't able to see anything with huge successful results to share with you, but people are really looking into this. How can AI help us fundraise, right? So there's a lot of a lot of skill that goes into being a good fundraiser and good development person for your organization. But a lot of those skills can be sharpened by AI. So identifying prospects by using data and trends and understanding what's going on in the data of who has given in the past, how often they give, when, why, who, where, what, all of those things, and helping you develop those strategies. And again, understanding donor behavior. So think about that. If you're a fundraising person, this is a great space to consider how AI can be opened up. All right, moving on to chatbots. So this is probably one of those areas that people are most familiar with AI in its more recent iteration. It's something that you may also be exploring for how you can use it at your organization. And many of the use cases I already mentioned, like I said, tie into chatbots. So as Sean mentioned in his overview of AI, we're not talking about that old style where you have to give it logic and kind of say, okay, if this, then that, this, then that, and then kind of branch it out. It really is truly that amazing exponential growth where it is thinking, it is coming up with human-like answers. So we are really looking at generative AI. And these are extremely powerful tools that can answer really complex questions. So some of the benefits of a chatbot is, again, that immediacy, right? So as soon as they come up with a question, before you could even, give it some thought and think about it and get your hands to the keyboard, it's already typed out a well thought out, well researched answer for survivors, which again, I mean, you think about the survivor journey and the limited time that they may have to connect with someone for help. That's just so important, right? It makes a huge difference. They can help them to find resources. So for example, domesticshelters.org, there's a lot of resources on there. So using a chatbot to find exactly what you need when you need it more quickly. Thinking about it in terms of intake and pre-screening. So how can you integrate this idea of an artificial intelligence just to use the data to help pre-screen people and get them in the intake process more quickly. Safety planning and support is a huge one. The ability for an AI chatbot to talk someone through safety planning and help them to make a plan that works for them when either they don't have the ability to talk to a real person or it's just they're not ready to do that. And then support for professionals. So again, all these things that I'm sharing are ways that we can support you and you can use AI to support your work. Some examples are WYSA, W-Y-S-A, or Youper, Y-O-U-P-E-R, which are emotional support tools. So this is a chatbot that's available for mental health help. So it can kind of act as a little therapist for you, certainly not to take the place of a traditional therapist, but we have read great things about how these are being used in the mental health space. But yeah, mental health support, customer service, human resources, financial services, e-commerce, education, you've likely interacted with a chatbot in some way in one of these forms. And then as I've sprinkled in here, we may have a chatbot on domesticshelters.org. We hope that you've had a chance to chat with Hope Chat so far, but I just want to share a little bit more about Hope Chat and what our goals are with it. You know, it's kind of an example of how you can use AI to support survivors. So this launched on January 21st of this year, and we have so far helped. I wrote this stat probably earlier in the week, so it's probably over 17,000 people find help. And we are a team of 3. So 17, so do the math for me, 17,000 people since January 21st, and we were a team of 3. And how have we done that? So we've exchanged, I did write this down, over 75,000 messages. So these individual messages with survivors, family members, professionals. And we do this because of AI, right? We couldn't possibly exchange that many messages with that many people without the power of AI. So some examples of conversations that we've seen so far are people who are looking to leave and looking for a local program to support them and provide them with a place to stay. One of the biggest surprises that we've found, in the past, we'd always said, about 85% of people come to our website and read an article, watch a video, get resources and look around and get answers, I should say. And only 15% of them use the searchable database. That was what we found. And then here we are in Hope Chat world, and we see that 2/3 of the people that connect with Hope Chat are typing in their zip code and finding a program near them. It's a wonderful thing to see because we see that people who would have otherwise maybe felt a little bit hesitant to use the searchable database or felt a little unsure of what exactly domestic violence program is, they can ask that question, right? So after they type in their zip code, they can say, well, what does this program do, right? So can I bring my pet? Do they have, can I bring my children? Things that they just don't understand because there's no class in high school that teaches you what a domestic violence shelter does for you. What does that program do? And so it's right in that moment when they're making that decision, they can get those answers. So, those are certain cases of people who are know that they're experiencing abuse, but many times we get to people who are they're not sure if what they're experiencing is abuse. And we've been able to facilitate that learning from, he's just mean to me too. Oh my gosh, this is abuse. What's my nearest program? Okay, I'm going to make a phone call. We've literally seen that progression in a chatbot, which is just so wonderful to see and on such a great scale that could in no other form be done. So yeah, again, people want to know how to donate. So we tell people, you want to donate? What's your zip code? We're going to send them to your program if you're in our searchable database, and they're going to be able to pick up the phone and call you. And then also just those people who feel hopeless, right? So they maybe know that they're experiencing abuse, but they just feel as though they just don't know what to do next, right? So those ability to fill in. And I know what you're thinking in the back of your mind. You're like, these are things that advocates do, right? And this is no way a way for us to replace advocates, right? It's the idea of the scalability. It's the 2.7 million people that come to our website every single year, leveraging AI in a way that allows them to get the answers that they need. So let's see. I'm going to skip ahead here. I took a little screenshot of Hope.js. I'm going to let this run as I kind of finish up, but this is what it looks like here. So just like a normal chatbot, right? You've got the idea. You can have a conversation with her. She gives you a little bit of information to start about what she is, right? We want to be very transparent in how we're talking about Hope Chat. So I just asked a simple question here. I think I asked, let's see. Oh yeah, my partner. So this is, in real time, a conversation that we've seen. And before I can even reach down to my keyboard, she's got a great answer. So just an example of what Hope Chat can do. Real quick, I want to pause. I think Hannah just posted in our chat to each other that there's a lot of great questions. So Strawn, before I turn it back over, oh my goodness, lots of questions. Let me scan through these and see if there's any that you're going to touch on, or if we should look at these for clarity now. Okay, these are some great questions. I'm actually going to let Sean, if you don't mind, we'll have you jump in with this next session. I'm going to focus on these questions for a second and see what we need to dive in on there. But a lot of them do revolve around this next topic, which is ethical concerns and how to address them.
Absolutely, yes. And I saw a number of those concerns coming up in the chat as well. And it's a great thing to be thinking about. So one thing that Ashley mentioned in her examples of talking about uses of AI, talking about how, some policing is using it or things are using it and oh, it eliminates the bias. Well, as some of you clearly pointed out, it doesn't eliminate the bias completely. So although AI, and I'm trying to make the case right, it's just a program, that program is being created by humans, and there's a few different ways that bias is going to enter into that AI's training, and so therefore how it responds to things. The first way that that's going to happen is through the data that it's being trained on, right? This concept of machine learning, we give it this large data set and say, identify patterns. Now, depending on what that data set looks like, it is going to find whatever patterns it has access to in that data. The problem is that oftentimes data sets are not representative, they're not diverse enough, or they might be too small of a sample size, or they might be conflating things or reflective of societal biases that we have. So some examples of seeing this is Amazon decided they were going to try to make an AI model to help them pre-screen their applicants applying for jobs. And so what they did is they fed the model the data of their previous successful applicants. And then they looked at the results and they were surprised to find that their model rejected women almost exclusively. And that was because they were looking at the data, right, from years past and showing that their hiring practices and, right, the industry itself, right, has a minority of women. And so they weren't selecting as many women for their for their hires. And so the algorithm thought that that's what it should do as well. So that obviously is not what they intended. Luckily, they saw this and decided not to use it because they found that this was true. But this is just one example. I'm sure we can think together of many other things where the data that that you're able to collect is not representative or diverse enough without care taken to ensure that that's happening. So that's one example and one way that bias is going to enter into these algorithms is through the data. The other way that this can happen is through the actual training process. So when you are creating one of these AI models, you collect your data, but you have to also determine, well, what do I want this AI to do? Like maybe I want it to, categorize pictures, right? Or I want it to, predict the next word or whatever it is, identify these criminal patterns, right? You have to define what you expect the correct output is so that when you run the data through and the AI is making these judgment calls, you can say, oh, you got this one right, you got this one wrong. And by creating that benchmark as a human, right, there is a chance for you to introduce bias in that way, right, by assigning what is right and what is wrong and missing nuances. So that's another way that the people creating these AI models might be introducing bias. So bias is something to be concerned about. And so there are obviously things that we want the people creating these AI models to be thinking about. We want them to ensure that they are choosing data sets that are representative and diverse and are a large enough sample size. We want them to make sure they have appropriate oversight in how they develop these models. We hope that they're doing that. But that's not enough because we don't control that, right? As someone who's using these AI models, I don't get to decide how the company develops the model. So I have to think, is there something else that I can do regarding the bias that I know could be introduced there? And one of the things I can do is I can ensure that the way I interact with this AI, I'm implementing processes in that I am creating some sort of structure and oversight in what it's generating. I'm going through a process, right, where I'm making sure that its responses meet the criteria I want it to meet. And if I notice that there's a pattern, I notice that there is some bias that's being introduced, something I can do is I can provide the model right, with some extra data to help offset that bias that it's introducing. Obviously, I have to be careful. I don't want to introduce my own bias, but that's something that you have to be careful about and you have to be cognizant of. So that's a very real issue there. Other things that we're thinking about ethically is privacy and data security. We touched on this before. So again, as a user of these AI models, I have to be thinking about, how are these companies that I'm interacting with, what are their policies around data, right? So I'm making sure that I'm reading those and understanding how they're going to use my data. Are they going to store my data? Are they complying with, HIPAA? Are they complying with GDPR? I'm reading these things and making sure that I'm not going to interface with an AI model, no matter how great it is, if I cannot read their policy and understand how they're going to protect data. But I also have to think about how am I interfacing with it, right? So when we're building something like Hope Chat, we're not just thinking about how we're interacting with that AI model. We're also thinking about the data that's flowing through us, through the domesticshelters.org website, right? So making sure that none of that data is going to be stored and accessible on a survivor's device. That was something that was very important to us when we were designing this chat, making sure that, if they close that tab, that if they're living with someone that they're concerned about, they couldn't then open up that web browser and find any evidence of that conversation on that computer. That was something that we wanted to make sure. So all of the privacy and data security you have to be thinking about on both ends. And then, of course, there's trust and transparency. The whole goal of using AI in these ways is we want survivors and victims to use these tools, but they're not going to use them if they don't trust them. So we have to make sure that we're communicating really clearly what AI's role is. As Ashley said, we're not trying to replace advocates, right? This is a different tool that's serving, a different purpose. And we want to make sure that we're doing that in a thoughtful way, and we're making sure that we're using it in conjunction with advocates, right? With humans that are trained to understand the complexities and nuances of these cases. Actually, are there any of these other questions you think we should?
Yes, so there are a lot of questions, and I think I want to dive into some that kind of align with what you were sharing. And I don't know that I have the answer for it, but I think we can kind of dissect it and help people make an informed decision for their organization, which is if you want to use and implement AI in the DV as sexual assault realm, from a protocol/procedural standpoint, would you need to have victims and survivors sign some sort of release of information, right? So I think probably the best way to approach this is understanding, right? Kind of like you said, what is the tool that you're using doing with that information, right? So if you feel comfortable that it ends with you and it stays on local servers, then you kind of have to go that route. But any other considerations as someone's deciding how they what kind of forms someone would need to sign?
Absolutely, that's a great point. I mean, one thing you can consider is, are there ways that you can anonymize data before you give it to AI? If you're concerned about personal information being shared, right? That's a real concern, even if there are, well documented rules and regulations for how this company, is doing whatever it is with your data. If you're concerned about sharing data with those AI providers, think about, are there steps you can take, intermediate steps where you can anonymize the data? So just to cut that risk even more. But I'm certainly no legal expert, so I can't say
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah, I think that that's a great kind of insight on it, right? So it's not inherently safe. You should not just go into it assuming that the data is protected and goes through all the steps. Anytime that you're evaluating a new technology, you want to be very, very cognizant of the privacy and where that data goes. But it sounds like one solution could be if you're developing it from scratch or you're working with a tool, you can figure out how to make sure that that data is anonymized and kind of de-identified. Great. Let's see. So we have some questions that are going to, I'm gonna dive into this now so I don't run out of time, but people asking about, can I put Hope Chat on my website, or I'm considering doing a chatbot. What are kind of some concerns, things of that nature. So I do want to mention, I kind of glossed over this, that we are piloting a program right now where Hope Chat will be available for domestic violence programs to not only put on their website. So it's not just taking the Hope Chat on our site and putting it on your site. It is taking Hope Chat, training it on your organization to understand the services you provide, the context in which you provide them, geographical area that you provide them in, and all of those, the ways in which you interact with your clients and people who reach out to you, training Hope Chat to do that, and then allowing it to live on your site. So I'll ask Rachel again if she could drop a link to the chat for anyone that's interested. We're just collecting people's information now. This is several months away in terms of when we're able to actually introduce this into new people's websites, but this is something that we're looking into. And then someone had mentioned I currently have a chat feature on my website where people can talk to real people. That is something we're hoping down the line that we're able to integrate with as well, right? So we're able to say, you're on your specific organization's website, someone is having a great conversation with the AI, they're getting the information they need, but something maybe kind of pops up as a red flag that's like, I think this person needs to talk to a real person. And so if someone's available, then they'll connect them. So these are just some ways things that are possible with AI and things that we're actively pursuing. But first step is that we are within, several months away from having a Hope Chat that we can put on your website and train to your organization. So thanks for asking those questions and reminding me to share that information with everyone, because that's very important and something that we're really excited to be able to bring to everyone. I'm gonna real quick, I know there's more questions that are probably even relevant, but I want to get through just these last couple of slides that really do touch on how to get ready for the future of AI. So we've talked about, you're being here today is kind of that first step, right? So you are here, you are learning, you're finding different ways to think about AI. But we want to just talk about different ways that you can stay informed and learn. And so just reminding, you don't need to be a coder, you don't to have AI literacy, just learning, signing up for different blogs, listening into domesticshelters.org. Make sure you're on our email list because we're going to constantly be talking about AI. But one email that I actually just found this recently, which is Nonprofit Tech for Good. We're going to drop the link in the chat for that, but this has been a great resource for us in staying up to date on AI, watching AI videos on YouTube, just anything that you can do to learn. And then we also just so happen to have another program that we offer called Verizon Skill Forward. We're partnering with Verizon to offer free online courses, self-paced, you get professional certificates, top universities, online support. We're providing that, one-on-one support. Email addresses there, but we're also going to drop a link in the chat. But just some examples. These are actual courses that are available to you for free right now. Foundations of AI, generative AI for everyone, AI for marketing, AI and data analytics for business leaders, and there's more. Models and platforms for generative AI, impact ethics and issues with generative AI, AI in practice, applying AI, and then the list goes on. So these are not specifically geared towards domestic violence professionals, but the knowledge and information that you're going to find here is really going to help you to better understand AI. So really encourage you, again, these are free courses. You sign up through the link that we drop in the chat. We'll also share it in the shared resources, so you have it if you didn't get it today. And this will allow you to sign up for free. You get a year and you can take these courses and you get professional certificates. But one thing I just want to mention in this idea of, as we're moving into the future, this idea of it's not a matter of set it and forget it with AI. I mean, maybe someday that's where we're heading. I don't really, know how people view this, but this idea is it's a human in the loop. So with Hope Chat, we are constantly in the loop with what Hope Chat is saying to survivors, and we are constantly adjusting. So Hope Chat isn't a kind of model that you maybe have heard about where it gets smarter every time it has a conversation. That's a whole different kind of realm of AI, and it's a lot more expensive to run, a lot more complicated. What we are doing is essentially when we see something that's wrong, we make her better, right? So we work from the ground up, which is kind of prompt engineering, creating tools, other kind of bits and pieces that help her to answer questions better. So she's not necessarily taking in the information from every conversation, but we are, the human in the loop that's making those changes and making it better. And just being very, very important that you are transparent with your data practices. So if you're using an AI, like we talked about, make sure you feel comfortable that there isn't a release that needs to be signed, or that you feel comfortable that there should be some kind of release and people should be very aware of what you're doing. And then, of course, being inclusive and aware of bias. So using it responsibly. And then I just want to encourage everyone. So a lot of the examples that I shared today don't necessarily have a solution, right? So I can't just say, go to this website and this is the tool and it does this for you perfectly. We're very much in a space where that may be true soon. Someone's probably identified the problem that you have and maybe working on an issue, but maybe not. We want to encourage people to reach out to universities, reach out to AI researchers, tech nonprofits, and tell them what you're up against, because they may have the resources to develop that for you. They might find, like in our case, where we saw this issue for an AI chatbot for domestic violence survivors, and eventually, a kind of a chat function with live chat. We see that as an issue, and we want to be the ones that help to make that a possibility. So don't feel as though you have to go on this alone. Find a tech partner. If me, Rachel, Rachel and Hannah, we would not be able to do Hope Chat alone. We need By the Pixel. You need someone that knows what they're doing. And you've got to build those relationships with people that you trust and kind of have your back in this, because there's a lot of really great things that can be done with the right partnership. So and is important because what you bring to the table is very, very valuable too, right? So you understand trauma-informed care. You understand the ethics of domestic violence. You understand the context that domestic violence survivors are coming from. So do not discount what you bring to the table in those relationships, because that's not something that the person, Sean, I'm sure you can agree, that's not something outside of just working with us that you feel that you have the expertise in. So be very, very cognizant of that. And just, invite partners to co-create tools that meet the real world needs of survivors. People want to get involved in these projects. So just know that they're not all developed now. So this is kind of where we turn everyone off into the world and to make things better. So I want to take this poll question real quick, and then we're going to spend the last, hopefully we'll have at least 25 minutes to cover as many questions as we can. But Rachel, do you mind launching that second poll question? I want to see if we've made an impact after we kind of demystified domestic violence. Is anyone more likely to use domestic violence to support survivors? And I think we're already seeing the results. So really love to see that. We'll let a few more people log in here. This is a poll, so you should see a poll box popping up in your Zoom window. If not, just type it in the chat. I will collect the data there. Wonderful. This is fantastic. This is way more than I thought. So I knew this webinar was needed when I started to learn more about AI, when we started going down this path of Hope Chats. I'm going to end the poll and share with you guys. Hopefully you'll be as pleasantly surprised as I am, right? So we've got this shift now. I'm so glad to hear people are not necessarily going to go out tomorrow and, create some new AI tool, but I like just this openness to it, because it's like saying that, maybe back in the day that, oh, this internet fad thing's going to go away, right? It's not going anywhere. It's exponential. It's going to keep growing, and there's going to be more and more ways that AI is integrated. And by us, getting involved in this conversation and putting domestic violence survivors' needs in the forefront of this technology early on, it's only going to help domestic violence survivors in the end, right? It's going to help make sure that we're at the table and decisions aren't being made to the point where it's hard to reverse because it wasn't considered. So that's my 2 cents there. So let me pop over, Sean. I'm gonna ask you to come back on because we're gonna dive through. We have quite a few questions. I'm just going to, I know Hannah's been organizing these for me, so I can just go ahead and dive in. But the first question we have, and encouraging everyone, if you have a question, please do put it in the Q&A box and we'll get it in front of me so I can pose the question. But how do we know if content is fake? So AI content is faked. It looks and sounds so real, right? That's the whole idea, right? Is that it's good. So is there any way to know? I mean, you said kind of be skeptical and that, but are there any way to know? Or is...
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question to answer. So by looking at, just the content itself, it may be very hard to tell. So really what we're looking for is turning to trusted sources that can vet and really making sure that they're confirming what you're seeing is real or is it not, which I know feels a little scary, that's the best I can offer. But that's where we are right now. And as we said, it is getting better. We can hope that there is work being done to try to, detect these things better, to try to, more guardrails put into place, but it's very difficult. So yeah, that's the best I can offer is really always double checking your sources, and making sure that you find those trusted sources that are going to give you accurate information.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's important to acknowledge, right? That is the best that we can do. So it's hard because we already have to be so skeptical about everything in this world, and so now with AI, there's even more need to be skeptical. So the next question, our agency has considered adding a chatbot on our website. How would you recommend navigating ethical concerns and considerations for this? I'll start with some information about kind of our thoughts behind Hope Chat, because certainly there's a million different ways to approach this, but our approach was essentially, like you had said, Sean, not collecting identified information. So this ability, if they exit the chat's gone, there's nothing there for anyone to find. And then also kind of having this closed brain, if you will, of the knowledge that it can gather, keeping it within domesticshelters.org. So we know that all the information that it finds is based in reality and based in expert vetted. But any other considerations for someone that may want to explore a Hope Chat or a chat bot for their website?
I think exactly like you said, Ashley, thinking about that data privacy, and really doing the research and whoever you're working with, really vetting the tools that you're using. So the companies that are supplying the AI models, and like I said, reading through that fine print to make sure you understand, how they're going to use the data, things like that, and then making a really clear sort of benchmark or milestone for what you want to accomplish. I think that was something that was very helpful in thinking about Hope Chat was, there was this very clear vision for what Hope Chat was going to be and what Hope Chat was not going to be, right? Hope Chat was not going to try to tell people what to do, right? Hope Chat was not going to try to take the place of an advocate. So really limiting the scope so that you can put those guardrails in place. For instance, Hope Chat is helping users find, those vetted resources on domestic shelters that we know are good. They're written by humans and things like that. So that would be my other recommendation, is really thinking about the scope and not letting it just run wild.
Yeah, great. I also just want to point out, Rachel or Hannah, if you ever have anything that you want to chime in with, please do. Feel free to turn your mics off, but we'll continue on with the questions. I'm going to just go down to this one. So I think of how frustrating it is to have a nuanced problem and being referred to something like an Amazon or like a chatbot. I'm concerned about the use of AI for someone in a true emotional crisis. I'll kind of lead in here with kind of a domestic violence perspective. And I think, yes, absolutely. We've seen people that are talking to Hope Chat and are just, I want to talk to a person, I want to talk to a person, like that's their main objective. And so thankfully Hope Chat can, help to bridge that gap by getting them a name, a number, a hotline for their local program, but that's not always what they want, right? So we kind of look at it as it's not the means to that end. It's not going to solve that issue, but what would be the situation if Hope Chat wasn't there, right? What would be, they wouldn't have anywhere to share what they're thinking, what they're going through. So it's definitely not the solution for those people who want something right now, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, and it's going to help them to kind of understand, to kind of start to gather some information and hopefully see some clarity in their situation about what to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add on, similar to what I said before, right? Really having a clear goal of what you want to use the technology for and what you don't want to use it for, because it's not going to solve every problem. It can't solve every problem, right? So something that we have, in Hope Chat is we have, this emergency button, and that emergency button is used to tell someone, if you're in an emergency, this isn't where you need to be, right? That's not what this is for. So trying to give people, upfront, this is what, this tool is for. If you want to talk to a person, that's something different.
Yeah, kind of similar to, when you would call a phone line, you hit 9 for, all the different options. It's that same technology, but just definitely accelerated. Talked about bias a lot. We didn't really necessarily say the word political bias. We talked a lot about probably racial or gender bias, but again, this idea, the question was, how do you know that the information you get from an AI is not politically biased? I mean, one, you got to be skeptical, and two, if you're one creating the tool, you've got to know what's in the system, right? You got to know what data they're pulling from. Yeah. How does an organization apply AI for some of the suggested purposes? So we kind of touched on, I think this was an earlier question, so hopefully we gave some examples in that last part, but I will touch on fundraising. One way that you can use it for fundraising is writing marketing copy. So again, using the basic chatbots that we've all kind of been knowing and loving, ChatGPT, Claude, those types of chatbots. Any other that I should mention, Sean, because I kind of am sticking on those too, but what are some more of the common ones that people are using these days that maybe we should say at some point?
Yeah, those are definitely the big two. Gemini, right, is Google's version, which is another big one. Yeah, those are the sort of the biggest players at the moment, that I would reference.
Yeah, and to that point of the fundraising piece, you're kind of having to get creative with how you use them. I don't doubt that there's probably a fundraising tool out there that's using AI that may already exist or maybe is in beta right now that may becomes like kind of the norm in the future. But right now you can do things like, talk about, just in narrative, talk about your program and who your audience is, and just give it information and say, act like a donor or a fundraiser. What strategy would you suggest? You can upload data to it, different things, maybe de-identify it so you don't have to worry about that, but just some basic data, and it can kind of think for you. So just use it as like an extra brain for how you interpret that data. Back to Hope Chat, talking about other languages, what we've developed so far, essentially, right? If you ask a question in Spanish, it's going to respond in Spanish, but it very well may revert back to English at some point in the conversation. And this is all largely because of how domesticshelters.org is set up and how we operate. We currently simply have our information in English, but the beauty of Hope Chat is it can kind of have a conversation in really whatever language the person speaks in. Yeah. This is one definitely for Sean. So how would AI help with paper documents? So is there a program that can help us upload and use AI? So this question, I want to have you maybe talk a little bit about OCR capabilities. So when you are, sitting here with a piece of paper, you scan it in, how does AI know anything other than just black and white?
Absolutely. So AI, there are models that are visual. So mostly what we've been talking about, right, are large language models that are focused on text, right, language. However, a lot of these models now can also process auditory, and they can process vision. So you can upload a picture, and it is able to understand that picture. So it can very, very well extract the text from that to understand it. That's sort of one direct way. If you're creating a custom tool, then you actually have even more capability of deciding how you want to process that information. So programmatically, that's something we've had for a long time, is to be able to take an image and extract text from that image. So we can do that as programmers and then send that text directly to the AI to then process further. So there's multiple ways that can work.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing that it can see an image and interpret things. That's quite advanced and pretty exciting. When it comes to grant writing, I just want to reiterate one of the tools that I mentioned earlier, which was notebook.lm. That is a Google tool. So if you're curious what program I would recommend for grant writing, that's a great space to start. And then really, I think that this is probably something that I don't know if there's much more we can add now, but I see it as a great article for domesticshelters.org to explore, which is just, I mean, we keep coming back to that confidentiality and HIPAA and all the different things that come into play when you're working with someone in a space of domestic violence. So, you know, like we said, it's important, or as Sean mentioned, like the idea of understanding what the AI tool is doing with the data, being very clear about it, and then, you know, making a decision on how you interact with it. So I don't know, unless Sean, if you have anything else to add to that, I just want to kind of reiterate that that's a question that I can see us exploring more in the future.
Yeah, no, I think for now that's what I would say. The only other option you have, and this is getting more advanced, but it is getting better. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about efficiency and how these models use so many resources. So one of the reasons that right now we use models that are controlled by these large companies is because they just require so much hardware to run that it's not viable for you to say run your own that you control and have the data, right? But there is work being done to make more and more efficient models that potentially you could run your own. And so that is, I think, a near future is that potentially you could be using a model in-house, right? So that you actually have full control over that data and the data security of it. That is an option. Like I said, I don't think it's super viable for most people right now, but I don't think it's very far off for at least certain use cases. So that is something else to consider as we, you know, look to the future in this area.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing to learn about, in this idea that we're not the only field that's dealing with HIPAA and privacy issues within AI. So I think that it's something that everyone's kind of dealing with. And not that I say we're not really in the Wild West phase. I think we're a little bit more civilized than that at this point, but it's something that's going to kind of be top of mind for everyone. Where does AI get its information from? How does it update that information? When I Google something, who puts the info in there? Do people just sit there and update it? So yeah, where is this data coming from? Where does everything live? How does
That's a
the
great
internet work, Sean?
question. Yeah, so there's a couple things here. So remember we said these large language models, right? The model part is the algorithm that is able to sort of generate this text based on the parameters that it has come up with during that training process. That training process is a fixed time frame, and so oftentimes when you look at these models, they'll tell you what their cutoff date is, meaning that they were trained on data up to a certain date, and anything after that they don't know about in their training data set. Now, the training data set is all the information that's stored in the model, all that learning that it did. Now, that being said, there are ways to update that information and narrow what the model is looking at. And that's, for instance, something we do with Hope Chat, right? Is we give Hope the ability to look at the articles on domesticshelters.org and other resources. And so when someone's having a conversation, we actually are able to search the database and find some potentially relevant articles and give those to Hope so that she's able to recommend those articles if they seem relevant, to extract some, important key points from them, to help answer the question. And so that's one way that you can, get more updated information, is by giving the model that information in real time, the information it needs in that particular conversation. So that's one strategy. And the other strategy, obviously, the people making these models, they're constantly making new ones that have more information in them, or more up-to-date information in them.
Yeah. Thank you for that. One last question, and then I think we're going to kind of wrap up a little early here. I have a not a challenge, but an adventure challenge by choice for everyone as we wrap up. But I want to touch on this as a question came in: is there a grant to cover the cost of Hope Chat? So we haven't set the price yet. We've kind of gone back and forth on where we're going to land on this, but in terms of the cost, we don't have any formal grant programs. Again, this is very, very early on the stage. We're just piloting the program. So we hope to hear back from feedback in terms of what is a reasonable cost for the value that we provide. But yeah, no grants at this time, but we are certainly in our minds, the goal is to get this in front of as many survivors as possible, because we see it as a value, and we see it as being life-changing for people. We've had reviewed conversations that have really made an impact on us, because we see someone going from just complete confusion to, I'm going to pick up the phone and make a call on Monday, or I've committed to reading these articles. And it's really exciting to see that. So I know we're talking about more than just chatbots today, but that's, where we're kind of leveraging AI in the future. And again, Rachel, if you don't mind dropping in that chat, the link, just if you're at all interested in learning more about Hope Chat. We don't have anything right now to share, but we will in the coming months. And we want to make sure that if you want to look at Hope Chat, how it can fit into your organization, we'll be in touch and we can kind of do a little demo of what we're doing. But yeah, anything, Sean, any closing words, anything you want to send everyone off with before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered it. I think the only thing is, I hope that what you've come away with is that AI is not, it doesn't have to be scary. And it is, as Ashley said, it is here and it's here to stay. So it's something that I think we all need to learn how to engage with responsibly, and see what we can do with it that's useful and productive. And this space is a great one to be exploring.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. Yeah. And I'll just add, the future of AI and DV work isn't about replacing people, right? It's about empowering them by preparing now. You can lead the way in shaping that technology. So let's not shy away and get involved in this conversation. So I love seeing all the great feedback. That means a lot to us. I know we've been really looking forward to this presentation for a long time. So Rachel's going to send out a survey. So we hope that you'll share your thoughts and ideas there, because as you've learned today, AI is a very much evolving technology. So we want to make sure that we're able to help you prepare. So whatever questions maybe weren't answered, or just thoughts that you have, we want to hear those so we can better serve you all in this wonderful technological space. But yeah, thanks again, Sean, for your time today. It was such a great opportunity to learn more from you. Every time we talk, I learn something new, and I'm so glad that you were able to share your wisdom with all these wonderful advocates. I think we had over 600 people join us today, which was fantastic. So thank you to everyone who tuned in. Just a reminder that we will be sending a recording to you. So this was recorded, so you can share this with everyone on your team, so you're all on the same page about AI. And we'll also send a transcript, a list of resources and links. So anything that we mentioned here, we've been capturing, and we'll share that with you. We'll have a transcript recording and a certificate of attendance, so you can get credit for being here today. But with that, again, thank you so much, everyone who joined, and we'll go ahead and conclude today's presentation. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.